So, who are you and what do you write?
I am J.Thorn. I write horror, dark fantasy, post-apocalyptic genre fiction.
And what is this crazy thing we've been doing this week?
We've been doing a 4-author collaboration in My American Demon Hunters world, which in New Orleans in 5 days. It's a little crazy.
And where did you get the idea for this, and why did you want to do this in the first place?
Honestly, the idea came as a bit of a joke. I was on an Amtrak trip and I was doing a lot of writing and I was tweeting about it, and I think Lindsay may have responded, and I made a joke and said, "Oh, well, we should write something together." And that's honestly where the idea came from. I collaborate a lot, and I'm always looking for new and different ways because I like a challenge. So I do some things the same way, but I like to try and up my game, so to speak, and just try something different and really push myself.
So how has this week pushed you then? How has this week taken your collaboration experience forward?
It's been the most invigorating and yet challenging collaboration I've ever done, and I would do it again in a heartbeat. I think what's really challenging for me personally is that it takes place in one of the worlds I've created. So I'm sort of like the kid who invites everyone over for a play date, and I know what game I want to play, but I can't force it upon people because they're my guests. So I've been trying to walk a fine line between giving input, but not sort of bowling people over with what I think it should be because it's my world. So that's personally been a challenge for me. And I think just the compressed time frame and the logistical pieces of it and the time element. I mean, I don't think we've talked too much about this, but we've been working a lot on this week between the reading and the writing and the story meetings, and it hasn't just been a vacation.
Well, I think I've had more of a vacation than you have. Like, I've been going around doing a lot of stuff. But yeah, I mean, why did you pick New Orleans? Because, I mean, actually we ended up doing the story on the train, right?
That's correct. There's something magical about train travel. I really believe that. It's romantic. I think it's people.
Those sleeper cars are not romantic, Jay.
No. Romantic in the sense of the history of travel, not in like lovey romantic or like people have this, and maybe it's an American thing, but we have this fascination with the West, and the West was rail travel, and there's something there's something to that, I think, and having and being on a train, there isn't much else you can do, and I've written on a train before. I've taken trips from Chicago to California and back multiple times. And for this one, I thought that the destination really mattered. And I had been to New Orleans a few times. It's one of my favorite cities in the world, and it just seemed like a good match. And we hadn't decided whether the story was going to be placed or set on the train or in a city, but having that as the destination seemed like a really cool thing to do.
So were there any other, I mean, maybe just elaborate more on some of the bumps in the road as such that we've had, and how they've been overcome, because I think it's changed during the week. Like, there were challenges at the beginning, and then there have been different challenges later on in the week.
Yeah, I mean, there's 4 of us, so we're all going to have our own perspectives on it. The challenges I think we've faced were ones that we had to. Like, if there weren't sort of if there wasn't creative tension, then I don't think we'd be doing it properly. So I think there were questions around the cover and we had to go for sort of a second look at the cover.
It's a great cover now.
It is. It's great, and Keelan always does great work. But we weren't quite sure what we wanted on the first pass, so it wasn't anything that he did or didn't do. It was just the creative process, and it's messy, and there are moments where it's really smooth and moments where it's hard. I know personally for me, one of my challenges is the time element, and so I don't always read as carefully as I should because I'm worried about like getting the words in, and so that caused me to overwrite a few things that will end up getting cut, and that's okay. And I think too there's a human element to it. I felt like Tuesday night was sort of the low point, and that we were all exhausted, and it was late, and like I think that was the moment where the end seems so far away. Like you have the excitement in the beginning, and then you hit that middle point where it feels hard, and then we kind of got past that.
And I went to bed and left you guys to it.
But I mean, I think that was a moment, and that was totally fine. And that was a moment where I felt like, okay, I need to write something down, because if I can't keep this all in my head, and I don't want to make that mistake again. So again, like it all had to happen. Like I think that was just part of the process.
And how does this compare to other collaborations that you've done? I mean, you've done a whole lot now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely the most challenging, but also the most rewarding, because this is happening in real time, and in a way that, I mean, there's always deadlines, but in this circumstance, we knew going in, we have these many days and we have these many minutes together. So there's certain things that we have to do. Whereas if you're doing a collaboration asynchronously and you don't have a definitive deadline, you have the luxury of stretching things out, rethinking them. This one's intense, like, and we designed it that way, and we wanted it that way. But I also recognize that it's intense.
I mean, for me, the accountability of having only a limited time, like you guys are leaving, as we're recording this on the Friday, you guys are leaving tomorrow on the Saturday. I'm staying till Monday, but you know, we're pretty much done now. So we had this hard deadline of you guys leaving, and that accountability of getting words done. I mean, what's so funny is I was really worried coming into this, that because especially with Lindsay, I know, who writes so many words, I was so paranoid that I would be behind this week, whereas actually I've ended up being ahead most of the week because I got up earlier. But it's you know, what fears did you bring into this that may have turned out unfounded?
Oh, that's a great question. I don't think I had. I knew all of you. I don't know Lindsay as well as I know you and Zach, but we've known each other for years. You and I have worked together. We wrote a novel together.
Risen Gods, for anyone.
Ding, ding. And Zach and I have worked together on a few things as well. So I honestly, maybe I was being naive, but I didn't really have any sort of major, like I was not fearful that it would fall apart. Like I knew there would be moments where we would be tired, or moments where we would have creative differences, but I never thought like, wow, we could come home and have nothing. Like that just wasn't even part of it for me.
Yeah, because well, I never had that fear too. Like we're all professionals, you know. Even if we would have managed a short story, or 4 short stories in one thing, we would have delivered something.
Correct.
But yeah, I agree with you on that. It is an interesting sort of thing. So if you did another 4-person collaboration, not with the same people, let's just assume you're now going to do another 4-person, what would you do differently? How would you make it easier next time?
Yes, I've been thinking about that all week, and I've been writing down notes, because when you're in the experience, that's the best time to be reflective for whatever anyone's doing, any sort of creative work. And so I've been sort of taking some notes, and I was looking through them this morning, and there were 2 things that sort of stuck out for me. The first one is, doing this again, I would probably give it a genre theme. I think if you were very specific on what the genre was, and all those writers were already writing in it, and they knew the conventions, I feel like it would be a much more streamlined process. The second thing I would do is I would do more groundwork beforehand. And again, we made the decision not to. Like we explicitly said, we're not even going to talk about this till we get on the train. And that was great, and I think that was exciting, and that put a pressure on us that I think was good. But doing it again, I would probably do more upfront work, so that whenever we arrived, or whenever it was time to do the first writing session, we could sort of hit the ground running.
Yeah, and I think that's, you know, I was uncomfortable with that, so much so that I went and did research and brought an idea to the table, and then we did get going quicker. And you know, I did feel at the beginning, you know, I've been, and we actually, what was funny is we recorded Lindsay's podcast earlier in the week, and I was the bossy one up to that point. But then what was so funny is that that very night I went, okay, you guys do the rest.
Right.
So it's like, you know, we did throw the ball around in terms of the ideas. You know, the skull from the museum was just the first idea, but I think those are 2 good good things. So when you're like, with people listening interested in collaboration, like what are your recommendations if you're choosing people to be in a collaboration with? Like what is your checklist for the people that you want to work with, and what are the red flags for definitely not?
First and foremost, the most important thing is that you must have a prior relationship with someone. It doesn't have to be an in-person one, or it doesn't have to be extensive or long, but writing cold, I've had a number I've had at least 10 failed collaborations, and all of those failed because those were people who were acquaintances or sort of cold emailed me, and I didn't really have a relationship with them. So I think that in itself is the single most important element. And then if that element is satisfied, if you have someone who you know and you trust and you're friends with, I think then sort of setting up a project that's small scale, that is manageable. Like I probably wouldn't start out the gate with a full novel. Maybe I would start with a short story or a novella and get the process down.
So you also, with this American Demon Hunters series, you've worked with a whole load of different people and ended up with a whole load of different voices. What possessed you to do that approach with your own world, and how have you felt like it's gone?
Yeah, I was originally just going to say, well, demons possess me too. But I was like, no, and then I just said it anyways. I think I have to remind myself that this series isn't even 6 months old, or it might be 6 months old. It's still an experiment. I decided I wanted to incorporate other voices, and I couldn't map it out to the finest detail. So now I'm sort of in the second phase of it, where I'm getting some feedback, some great feedback that you gave me about ways that I can kind of smooth the edges a little bit. Part of it is it's not coming from the same head. So yes, the novellas are going to have variations in them. And I tried to structure the story beats in a way that at least the format would be consistent, like a television show. If you watch The X-Files, every episode might be written by 10 people or 10 different people, but the pace and the storyline of each episode is pretty consistent. So that's what I was striving for. So for this, I'm still really early, and I'm still trying to figure out exactly where I want to take this and what I want to do with it. But the reason for it was, again, to sort of stretch myself a little bit and push past the comfort zone and try something different.
And how are your own writing projects done just as your pure voice working while you're doing all these collaborations? Like, are you maintaining your own voice? Are you being influenced by other voices? And how is that? And how do you even balance your time?
I hear voices all the time, so that works out well. I think it improves my writing. I really do. Every time I collaborate with someone, I learn a ton of stuff, and then I get to incorporate that into my own style. So I think we all have our own voice, which is distinctly our own, and it's something that comes from within. But there's sort of the mechanics, the language, and the craft part of it that I learn so much from other people. And as far as the balance goes, my work style is one where it's hard for me to do short, intense bursts. Like this is really a challenge for me this week. What I like to do is do little pieces over a longer period of time, and then I stack those up so that I'm sort of changing what I'm working on throughout the day. So Zach and I, for example, are very different in this way. He likes to work on one project at a time, finish it, move on to the next one.
Me too.
Yeah. So I like to have, and not a lot, but I would say 2 to 4 at the most. If I have 2 to 4 projects, and they don't have to be writing projects, like they could be writing songs for my band, or they could be working on a video project or a writing project. But if I have 2 to 4 of those going, I feel like I don't ever get bogged down by any one. So for me, it kind of helps to have some variation.
So what are your plans for collaborations in a business sense? Because you have worked with so many different people now. Are you turning into James Patterson with all his collaborations? Do you see your niche, I guess, as a publisher being a collaboration guru machine?
I hadn't planned that. I'm very impulsive. I have ADD. I just jump into things without thinking too much about them. And my plan was not to become a collaborator. I'm an INTJ. I'm one, well, like the 2% of the population in that regards on the personality spectrum, which basically means I'm a super lone wolf, and I don't like working with other people at all. And people go, but you're the guy doing all these collaborations. So it's sort of evolved from that, and I think it's sort of given me a path now that I hadn't anticipated. And people started calling me the collaborator before I was, and I was like, okay, maybe there's something there. So that's kind of where I'm headed, and the start of that is going to be Molten Universe Media, which is the small press that Zach and I are starting. And I think that's kind of putting me into phase 2 of my indie author career. And with Author Earnings Report coming out and what you've been talking about on your podcast, I think there are a whole crop of indie authors who got into the game, around the beginning, the 09, 010, 2011, that are now sort of hitting that second phase. And I kind of feel like I'm on the cusp of that.
Oh, it's interesting you say that, because I feel that too. Like the movement is maturing, and some of the others who've I don't know what order we're going to play this in, but Lindsay and Zach, we've been talking about the people that you've never heard of who are doing really well, and the number of authors who are making a living, on the fringe of what publishing would be. But what are you excited about in terms of this next phase of the indie author movement?
I think what I'm really excited about is that I think, and of course predictions are always the worst thing to do, but I think it's going to go into it's going to follow the same path that it's done in the other mediums. So, I'm a big music fan, so independent music, independent film don't have a stigma. In fact, people rally around that. They love the indie movement in music and in film, and I think we're sort of flipping that paradigm now for publishing. So for me, it's really exciting to see people realize that they don't need someone to tell them what's good. Like they can decide for themselves. And that's kind of what the indie mindset's all about. Like you don't need a gatekeeper. You don't need someone to tell you this is what you should be reading because someone in a high rise has said this is what you should be reading.
And like you said about music, we're writing this thing together, but last night you and Zach went to a metal concert, and me and Lindsay were like, yeah, we won't skip that. And that's the thing, I think it's really important, and like you say, it's been accepted in music, it's been accepted in film, and maybe that is the next stage. I think the other shift is that, like you said, you guys are starting a small press, I've started a small press. I think you're going to publish other people because you collaborate more, whereas I'm not really intending to do that. But that's kind of the next question, because there's a lot of back-end pain with working with people in terms of the money and all of that type of thing. So, have you had to develop business systems, become more organized, all of that type of thing?
I'm naturally a fairly organized person. I'm really good with time management. I'm really good with project management. So those systems are easy enough. You can take them from your personal life, you can take them from your business life and sort of apply them. I think the legal aspects around this is where I really need to be cautious and informed. And so I've hired a tax person. I'm getting more into sort of more formal contracts. Anytime there's a sharing of the IP, that's where it gets more complicated. I don't know exactly what James Patterson's model is, but I'm guessing many of his writers are sort of work for hire, and in which case it's a simple transaction. It's like a newspaper journalist. You pay someone to write whatever piece that they're writing, and then you as the author, publisher, have 100% of the IP. So it really depends on where that is, but I'm sort of poised to step into that in a more formal way as we move forward.
Yeah, because the more people you work with, the more complicated it can potentially
get.
That's correct. Yeah. So how do you handle? Because you're a pretty laid back guy, which is great. A lot of people listening might not be, and I think if I was in, I don't think I would ever be in charge of a collaboration. Like in terms of I couldn't do this, and try and edit everyone and that type of thing. But how do you handle retaining someone's unique voice while trying to present a quality product that everyone can enjoy?
I honestly don't know. That's really, that's the key to it all, isn't it? I mean, when you're talking about a co-writing collaboration, the ability to preserve what's unique about your voice, but also at the same time create a cohesive experience for the reader. That's really that's what we're all chasing. So I just do my best, and I learn every time. And especially with doing the American Demon Hunters novellas, and we talked a little bit about doing small scale projects. It's given me the opportunity to practice some of this without a major commitment. So, if we're talking a 10 or 15,000 word story, and I do that with 4 or 5 or 6 different people, every time I get better at that. It doesn't mean that there aren't conflicts and there aren't some hurt feelings, and there were hurt feelings in some of the novellas, and there were some things I did that I know that the writers weren't too crazy about. But I'm pretty responsive too, and I listen to people, and if it makes sense, I change it. But at the same time, I'm the publisher of record, and so I will have the last say. But I like to think I'm fairly reasonable if it comes down to, different elements of the writing that gets changed or revised.
And what's the best sort of personality mix, do you think, with a group of collaborators?
Well, you can't have too many alpha dogs. Clearly, it's probably, if I would go on a limb and without any scientific evidence, I would say it's probably more personality based than work style based. I think knowing who the people are and what they bring as people will trump sort of the work style. And you don't necessarily want all of the same type of people who work all the same way, but you don't want them to be radically different either, or else you won't get anything done. It's a balance. And I think a lot of that comes through in the relationship piece. I am generally pretty laid back, and then there are times where I'm like, no, this is just how it's going to be, and I can do that. And so maybe if you are the person who is thinking of organizing this, maybe that's one way you could approach it, is to be very flexible, but also know that there's moments where you are just going to have to say, this is how it's going to be, and everyone has to be okay with that.
Yeah, fair enough. And then just on the book marketing, so one of the things that's being talked about a lot right now with Chris Fox's book on the six-figure author and the Amazon algorithms, and we've talked about this book, American Demon Hunters Sacrifice, and in how between the 4 of us our also-bots could be quite messed up, as especially Lindsay particularly doesn't write demon stuff usually. She has some other things, but how does the marketing, do you think, work for all the co-writing stuff in terms of making the algorithms happy, and how have you done all the different marketing with different people?
I feel like I'm in a transitional moment, and I will credit Chris Fox for that, for better or worse. I would say even as late as last year or the year before, the general mindset was you had a book launch and you went far and wide with the message. You just blasted.
You just told everyone.
You told everyone, and you played the percentages, and that was sort of the game. And I think reading Chris Fox's stuff and understanding that the way the Amazon algorithm works, that hurts you. And I started my list in 2009 or 2010, and like you, I probably have this wide range of readers, people who are into horror, dark fantasy, other authors. And so blasting out to my list a new book is going to hurt me in a way. So I'm in this transitional moment now where I'm putting a lot of time into my list and down to individual people, asking them for their favorite genres, ranking their genres. And then what I'm starting to do now is tailor the broadcast to those specific people. And I haven't seen this firsthand yet, but I trust Chris knows what he's talking about. You don't need a ton of those on a launch. Maybe it's as few as 100. If you have 100 hardcore post-apoc readers and you send them to your book launch on day one, that alone might be enough to really set the algorithm going in the right direction.
Yeah, it's almost like you want to do it secretly and then tell your list later, because of course you want to tell the wider list, but maybe you want to do that a bit later, which is, can be, is a different thing, like you said, than what we've been talking about, and it's very hard with an established name.
Yes.
So that is interesting. So you also have a new podcast, The Petal to the Metal, which is an awesome name for a podcast. I mean, you have a number of podcasts. So for people listening, what are your different shows and where can they find them?
Yeah, the 2 that are running right now are The Intronaut at theintronaut.com, which is a podcast for introverts. which is more self-reflective. It's just me. Sometimes I have an occasional guest, and it's short form. Just about my experience as an introvert. And then the new one that you mentioned, which started in January of 2017 with Rachel Herron, my good buddy in in Oakland, not in San Francisco. She's a romance writer, and The Pedal to the Metal, which is at thepedaltothemetal.com, is a podcast about transitioning from day job to dream job. And we're both writers, so we talk about writing as a full-time author, but it really would apply to anyone any creatives who want to make that transition.
And then where can people find you and all your fiction, and also if people are interested in co-writing?
Yeah, all the fiction is at JThornNet, and that'll take you to anything you need. And if you go to jthorn.net/co-writing, there's going to be information there if you're interested in possibly a co-writing experience, and going to be developing out some face-to-face writer retreat type of programs. And so if you want to be notified and know how that's developing, just head there and I'll contact you.
Fantastic, because I think that's becoming much bigger in the author niche, so it's great that you're leading that charge, because I'm certainly not going to do it.
Well, I have the battle scars, and I know what to avoid, so if I can help other people out, then that'll be great.
That's awesome. Well, thanks for your time, Jay.
Thank you.